Hi guys, we're here at the Detroit Fan Fair and we're standing here with an industry legend, writer Jim Starlin. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Great. Do you want to talk about the book that you're promoting right now? This might end your career with Marvel Comics?
Well, I pretty well ended it already on my own volition for Marvel and comics. I'm doing non-corporate comics now.
Okay.
And the book is basically about my 40 years in comics. And there have been some good times with it, but there's also been some bad times. And, you know, when I wrote it up, I decided I was going to throw both of them in. And so I think that pretty well guarantees that I'll never work for either Marvel or DC ever again. But
is there a sample you can give us of something that might maybe ruffle some feathers?
The biggest thing was when I came back to do Thanos again, and we did the end, the Infinity Abyss and stuff like that. And when we finally got to the point where we're doing the Thanos book, Marvel's 5th best-selling book. And I thought, okay, things should be going well at that point. And within literally days of when we got the final sales figures and knew just how well it was doing, the editorial department decided to yank Warlock out of my book and tell me I couldn't use him anymore, and putting a lot of other restrictions on it, and told me if I didn't like it I could quit. So I have this rule that if somebody gives you an ultimatum like that, well, the best bet is to quit.
Now, is there something about maybe the corporate structure of Marvel, do you think, that leads to that kind of decision making?
I think it's corporate structure in America in general. I mean, we're basically these days, everything's set up where all the money goes up to the top and very little dwindling down to actually the people who produce anything. In comics, because it's a creative medium, the fact that so much it's geared around quarterly profits and that, especially over at Marvel, from what I understand, that the creative process is really hampered by the fact that they want to squeeze every cent out, and they want everything connected up to each other, so that you can't do a book just by itself. It's like I was going to do an Adam Strange book at DC at one point, and I was weeks away from starting to write on it, and turns out they forgot that they had him in the 52 series with his eyes gouged out, so we couldn't use him. That's why I used Captain Comet instead. So it's not as much fun as it was when I was doing it back in the 70s and 80s. So I've decided I'm doing my own things like Breed here. That way I have complete control over it, and I get to do the stories I want to do.
Excellent. Well, you know, it's funny because most of the time you're associated with a lot of the cosmic stuff, Warlock, Thanos, things like that. But one of my favorite comics of yours was actually Batman back in the 80s. And when I was a kid growing up, it was actually your Batman that first got me into the character. Do you want to talk about it all, about how that came about, about how you got the assignment?
Big Elmore Leonard fan, so I like crime stories. Denny O'Neil needed some fill-in issue of Batman, then he needed another one, and next thing I knew I was writing it regularly, and we did the Cult and Death in the Family from there. A need was there, and I fulfilled it, and I became the writer on the book. Denny was forcing me to use Robin, because I never wanted to use Robin in the book. I thought the whole idea of going off and fighting crime with a kid dressed up in primary colors while you're all dark and shadowy, well, that's called child abuse where I come from, but it just so happened that he wanted these things in, and so I decided I was going to study that relationship between the characters a little bit in those stories. And I knew that I was doing things where this wasn't a very popular character. I didn't want to do him. When I was forced to do him, I was going to do him in a negative way. And that all sort of led itself into taking us to Death in the Family. Denny came up with the phone gag, and the next thing I knew, I had what I wanted, getting rid of the character. I knew the readers were going to vote him out.
Well, now, as the writer of Death in the Family, how do you feel about them bringing back the character of Jason Todd?
Well, these characters are corporate assets. Nothing's going to ever stay completely demise. I'm not quite sure why they brought Jason Todd back, other than that, you know, it was a fan thing to do. But, you know, it's their decision, it's their characters, and they do what they want with them. Yeah.
Well, you know what, to wrap it up, I just got to say there are a lot of great writers on Batman, Frank Miller, Ed Brubaker, Greg Rucka, but in my opinion, you, sir, have always been my favorite.